Hi guys, Grace here. So today I'd just like to talk a little bit about Copic papers. I'm not sure whether to count this as a review or just like a demonstration as to how Copics or other alcohol markers will act with the different kinds of papers that you can use. So when I first started, our Copics are really expensive, as most of you would know. They can run from about $7 to $10 per marker. So I wanted to make sure that I was getting the right paper and didn't want to ruin the experience just because of I was using the wrong paper. So the very first paper that I wanted to get is the expressive blending card. I know that almost all the big YouTubers that use Copics, all the reviews that I could find online in blogs, they all recommend it, but it's so hard to get that in Singapore at a decent price. To get it, I have to pay more shipping than the actual product. So I have yet to get my hands on that, and these are just 5 that I have personally used and I can get pretty easily here in Singapore. So since I couldn't get that, I decided my best bet would be to go with the Copic branded papers. And this is the Copic paper selection, the custom paper. They have quite a few different papers in their range. I think they have this other one called the PM paper, which is instead of this turquoise green color, it's purple. So I've seen those reviews before, but surprisingly, I've never seen anybody do a review on this, like in depth. So I hope maybe this will help you if you're looking into Copic papers. The second one will be the Bristols. So I have 2 Bristols. One is the Clairefontaine Bristol, and the other one is the also pretty popular, the Strathmore 300 Bristol Smooth. So in general, you would want to, a smooth surface is preferable for Copics, because the first thing is that you do not want to wear out the nips, and usually smooth surfaces also allow much easier blending or layering techniques that you can use. So these are the 2 Bristols that I will be going through. And the last 2, this one on the left is the Canson XL marker pad. So this is something that I got very recently, and I only got it because it was on offer, and I held off so long even though this is marketed as so-called marker pad is because of how thin the paper is. So all of the previous papers that I have mentioned is at least 150 GSM, and this is half of that. This is only 70 GSM, and most marker pads come in the range of 60 to 80, and I'm just very skeptical because I can't believe such a thin paper would make sense to use alcohol markers on. I was worried about the tearing and worried about this and that. So I held off until there was an offer and I got this pen. And finally, the last one is the Clairefontaine Paint On. I think this is a good buy if you can find it at a decent price, because this is a mixed media paper, which means that you can not only use Copics, you can also just do ink, you can use watercolor, acrylics, and probably most of the mediums that that you use. So even if you don't like it for Copics, you can just use the paper for other things. So this will be the last that I will go through. So how this will be done is that I will do a demonstration on all the papers, and I will show you the test right now. So for all the papers, I have set up in the same manner, which is that I do a layering test, and as well as I write the name and then the price of the sheet in detail on the top right hand corner. So the first test is the layering test, which means that I'm just showing you whether putting different layers will actually make a difference on the kind of paper. Sometimes the paper is too wet or too dry, then you get different results. So this will be the first. And the color that I'm using is actually the RV25 Dog Rose Red. This color, honestly, I bought it just because of the name. I thought it was quite funny. It's probably some of a direct translation in a strange way because it's a Japanese brand. But I bought it because it was funny. In reality, I barely use this color. It's quite a difficult color to use in most situations, but oh well, it's okay. It's still funny when I see the name and I get a chance to use it. So the next the next test that I will be doing is the feathering test. So I just drew a random shape and I'm just trying to fill it in without and seeing whether it will go across the lines. Because sometimes when your paper is a little bit too, I would say absorbent, but in the wrong way of absorbent, what will happen is that when you lay down ink or when you lay down markers, what will happen is that it just feathers out. You can't control the ink flow in a nice and precise manner. So this is the second test that I have for you. And finally, in the last two rectangles, what I'll be using is a blue and a yellow. And I'll just be layering, at least I'll be trying to blend, but in a very simple way. So the left one will be a light to dark, meaning I lay down the yellow and then I lay down the blue and see how well it blends or how well it doesn't blend. And then on the next rectangle, I'll be doing the exact opposite, which is laying down the blue, then the yellow. So the first paper I'm using here is the Copic custom paper. And as you can see, I think the results are pretty nice. You can tell very even colors, and even though the light and dark, I didn't even use a lot of effort. I didn't even try to blend the colors properly. They still end up with a pretty nice green. So that is how I will be doing the rest of the test on all the papers. I won't show that. It takes a little bit too much time and drags the video on for nothing. So I'll do that and I'll be back. So as mentioned, I have done the same test on all the papers, and I will also slightly go through more of the characteristics and the price of each of the papers a little bit more in depth and what I think the paper is best for. So the one that I showed in the demonstration, the Copic custom paper, this one, as you can tell, is kind of like what I think is pretty good paper for alcohol markers, something that I started with, looks good with the layers, looks good with the blending. It's pretty nice paper. You can do most of the alcohol techniques such as blending pretty easily on it. So this is a good buy if you can get your hands easily on it. So I'm in Asia, which is in Singapore. So this is very readily available to me compared to the other papers. So this is about 45 cents per A4 sheet. It's definitely not the cheapest paper that you can get. And it's only 150 GSM, so it's a bit on the thinner side. But it looks good, colors come out vibrant. And I think this would be a good paper to start up if you can get it easily. So just on the back, I just wanted to show you how much it goes through. So for all the papers today, the good thing is that none of them bleed onto the next page. So for example, say if you are working directly on the pad for some reason, with the number of layers that I did today, none of them bled, but it's always better to be safe than sorry when you're working with alcohol markers, and always just lay a piece of scrap paper behind it. So I just wanted to show you the back. When it came to the 5 layers, this is how much of the color soaked into the paper itself. So the rest are okay. It's just mainly this area that is the most soaked through, and probably if I push it a little bit more and go over it once or twice more, it will probably bleed through to the other side. So for the next is the Bristols. So on here we have the Clairefontaine Bristol. It's the extra white. I don't really understand what it means by extra white sometimes. To me, white is white, off-white is off-white, ivory is ivory. So maybe this is probably just very white. I don't understand, but it's okay. And this is 205 GSM, and this is probably one of the cheaper papers and affordable place to start doing start alcohol markers on. For me, I got it only at $5 for 20 sheets in an A4 pad. So it comes down to only about 25 cents per A4 sheet. And yeah, so it looks good layered. You can tell the colors are pretty smooth when you layer them about 3 and more times. The first, definitely you will see some streakiness in all papers. This is something that cannot be avoided most of the time. And then the blends are also fine. You can see a little bit more streakiness compared to the custom paper. So let me give you a comparison. So you can see this one is a bit smoother, just a touch than this, but blending is something that you have to see what works for you best. Like some people like to go over the layer and alternate. So if they want to get a green, they go yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, like over and over again, or they just like, how to say, they like smidge around in one area constantly over and over again and really saturate that area to get that color. So all I did here was just one layer of yellow, one layer of blue, and vice versa. On the next thing would be feathering. All the Bristols did very well with the feathering test. Like, I can easily draw within the lines. If my hands were steady, I feel a little bit like strange today, but so I did color out of lines a little bit. So this is completely my fault, but going close to the lines, if I stayed inside, you can get a very precise coloring. So on the back, you can tell not much difference as compared to the Copic paper. The fifth layer almost soaked all the way through as well, but it still did not bleed yet. And the Strathmore, the Bristol 300, I can kind of understand why this is such a popular paper. It feels very sturdy. Like anything I do to it, it will take it and nothing will happen, and I can just blend and I can just layer and I don't have to worry about anything happening to the paper. The next thing is that it's a very comfortable off-white. It's not like very intense ivory. It's not like the Clairefontaine, which is very intense white. It's just this very comfortable off-white color, and it's pretty easy on the eyes, but yet the colors still come through very nicely. So both in the layering, the blending, also doesn't feather much, but this unfortunately is very expensive in Singapore. So it's difficult to get. I have only found one shop that sells this, and it only just came back in stock last week. So this is 60 cents per sheet, and each pad is 20 sheets. So the sizing is a little bit strange. I think because it's a US company, it's in inches. So when it translates to centimeters, it's 22.9 by 30.5 centimeters, which is a bit bigger than like A4. And it's just weird. I just don't use inches very often. But it's 60 cents, which is almost 2.5 times more expensive than the Clairefontaine Bristol. So if you are probably in the States, this may be a very good choice. But for me, I like it. But do I like it that much to buy this over something that's half the price to X in a very similar manner? I am not sure. I will have to see when I finish this pad. So the next one will be the Canson XL marker pad. This is the cheapest. It's only 13 cents per A4 sheets, and the entire pad is 100 sheets. I got this at an offer, which is maybe like, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was like 30% off or something. That's why I got it. And I am not very impressed. It just has this weird streaky factor. No matter how many times I layer, you just can't get it smooth, which is kind of strange. But the ink seems to stay on top of the paper for much longer than any of the other papers that I've used. So you can get very nice smooth blends, but the streakiness is still, it's just a bit weird. Like, it doesn't even dry like matte. It just dries in this like glossy finish on top of the paper rather than somewhat soaking into the paper a little bit. So giving you a comparison, this is the Strathmore, and you can tell once you get to the third, fourth, fifth, it's almost a very nice flat color. But in comparison to the Canson XL, even on the fifth, you can still see very obvious streakiness throughout the entire lay. And I'm not sure why this happens, if this is supposed to happen. But the really amazing thing is that practically doesn't bleed at all. I think it's quite safe to say this is bleed proof, despite it being so thin. And I really can't understand why. Like, maybe there is somewhat of like a like what's it called? Like layer on top of it. I'm not sure why it is. Then that may also be the reason why this streakiness happens and why it feels like I'm drawing on plastic rather than paper and why it doesn't bleed. But layout paper kind of makes sense. I think this would be good paper to have if you're just trying to do a draft on your final piece and you don't want to waste ink, you don't want to waste paper. This is very light, very easy. You can just doodle something, try out a few colors, and then do the actual one on maybe say like a Bristol board or something more adequate as a final piece. So maybe that's the purpose, I'm not very sure, but effect is a bit strange. You can probably just use this as like scrap paper or doodle paper, or maybe just throw it into your printer. It's not that expensive, so if you really don't like it, I think it's still fine. And finally, the last option is the Clairefontaine paint on paper. This is the paper that I mentioned that there is also a grained version. Try to avoid getting that one. I have felt the texture before. It's between this and a cold press for watercolors, so it's a bit on the rougher side, and usually we try to avoid rough papers for Copics because we don't want the nips to what's the word for it, to wear out. Yeah, we don't want the nips to wear out because like everything Copic, nips are also very expensive. In addition to the markers being expensive and the inks being expensive, the nips are also very expensive. So yes. So this is a very affordable option as well. This is only 22 cents per A4 sheet. There are 40 sheets in the pad that I bought for about $9. So everything works well, but my opinion on this is that the paper is very dry. Like it seems and it feels like it's soaking a lot of ink when I'm laying it down. So I don't know if I'm really using more ink or whether it's just a feeling that I got, but it does seem that way. But also because it's so dry, like the feathering test is perfect. Whatever you lay down just gets gets soaked up almost immediately. You don't get any feathering at all. It's completely like within the lines. But because it seems to soak that quickly, it's very hard to get nice smooth blends because you don't have time. The moment I laid one color down, it's like almost 70% dry, and by the time I lay down a second color, you can't really get anything moving anymore. And that is why it's almost like glazing in watercolor rather than like mixing the colors. So that is maybe a con, but this paper, to be honest, I think it's very good value. Even if you don't like it for Copics after buying it, you can use it for all other mediums, even watercolors, but maybe just a light wash. You can use it for acrylics, you can use it for just line work, and it's very thick, sturdy, 250-gram paper as well. So I think it's a good buy. And it does seep through a little bit more than the other papers. So I think my suspicions were right that it does soak more ink than the other papers. As you can see from the third layer onwards, this part is almost like as saturated as the fifth layer. Maybe I was a bit more heavy-handed here, but you can really see how much is soaked through compared to the others. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope this was helpful in helping you choose a paper for starting out, or maybe just to try another kind of paper. The next one will be on sketchbooks, and for that I only have 3 different sketchbooks, but still I hope it will be helpful, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.